Hola, buenas tardes a todos.
Hi, good evening to everyone. Well, let's start with this lecture by Dr. Judith Chow. Thank you for accepting this invitation, she says, and I'm going to read your bio. Dr. Chow has tenure in the Mary Ansari Entrepreneurship course and professor of research sciences in the Division of Atmospheric Sciences of the Desert Research Institute in Reno, Nevada, which is part of the higher education system of that state, Nevada. Dr. Chow has more than 40 years of experience in a series of studies on the quality of air and interpretation of studies regarding adverse effects on human health of environmental problems, ecosystems, and visibility and climate. She obtained her PhD in environmental sciences and physiology from Harvard University in 1985. As the director of the Facility for Analysis, Environmental Analysis of the DRI, Dr. Chow is leader of a group of researchers and scientists in the application of advanced analytical methods to characterize particles, atmospheric particles in suspension. She was a member of the Clean Air Science Advisory Committee of the Environmental Protection Agency of the U.S. To establish quality standards for air quality. Dr. Chow is co-author or main author of more than 500 articles, peer-reviewed, and approximately 100 chapters of books, also with peer reviews. She has been recognized by the IC Society in Ecology and Environment with more than 46,000 quotes of her work and an H index of 100 of 116.
Thank you once again, Judy, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Should I start it?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to first thank the Panorama committee for the invitation for this presentation, and I wish I could be there in person. So that you can see on the screen my topic of my talk today on the research areas and professional development in environmental sciences. Next. The objective of my presentation, first I'd like to introduce my experience and give you some examples of air quality studies and highlight findings, some important findings from the past projects I was involved. And second, I like to identify professional development activities available to environmental scientists. With my over 45 years experience in environmental sciences, I would like to share with you some lessons learned that might work for others. Let's start with a little bit of my personal background. I can't see myself here. This is challenging to do on video. And that my parents emigrated from mainland China to Taiwan in 1949 during the Chinese Civil War. You can see in the map that China and the little island on the right-hand corner, that's Taiwan. I was born, raised, and educated in Taiwan. I passed the college entrance exam and majored in biology at the Fujian Catholic University, obtained a BS degree, Bachelor of Science degree in 1974. Then I was a high school teacher for biology and health science for a year before I emigrated to the U.S. for graduate studies. In 1975, I started with animal physiology. I didn't like it, so I joined the workforce, joined a consulting firm as a chemistry technician and environmental scientist for 6 years before I went back to school to obtain a master's degree in environmental health science, major in air pollution control, and the doctor's of science degree in environmental science and physiology, major again in air pollution at Harvard University. After I received my graduate degree, I joined DRI for the past 40 years. I worked through the rank from assistant to associate to full professor until now. Next. Next one. This is backwards. Next slides, please. This is backwards. Okay, next. Thank you. Learning is international. With my colleague John Watson, we've conducted knowledge exchange workshops for over 25 countries. Part of them we use our own vacation and the holidays to get this together. We also get some support from the World Bank for the environmental health science program. And this type of workshop broaden our give us opportunities to meet with a lot of scholars and students and increase our networking. Although it's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding. Next. Here are a few examples and highlights of the research areas which have been involved. We continue developed new technologies for air sampling analysis. We also test emissions from different pollution sources, including real-world emission testing for stack emissions, vehicle exhaust, and wildfire smokes. We then use this data because those data are needed to attribute ambient exposures to various pollution sources. Once we identify and quantify the pollution sources, we can use this data to assess adverse effects on health, visibility, climate, and ecosystem. Our ultimate goal is to evaluate emission reduction measures for air quality management. Next. And for the Mexico studies, we first collaborated with Dr. Elizabeth Vega of UNAM. At the time, she was with the Instituto Mexicano del Petróleo, IMP. The 1997-1998 IMADA study, you can see the interpretation at the bottom of the slide for the study. It shows a large spatial variation in the Mexico Valley with 50% of PM10 are in PM2.5 fractions. Those PM10 and PM2.5, you can see the pie chart here, are lowest in Pedregal, that is in the southwest of the valley, which is that in a more high-income neighborhood, whereas the high concentration find in Nessa, we call on the right-hand side, I can't pronounce that, and at the Hollistock. And you can that was the industrial area in the northeast. The NASA side has abundant resistant particles because they are near get influence from the dry lake bed or Lake Texcoco. And if you focus on the PM2.5 pie charts, you find out that PM2.5 constitute of more than 50% of carbonaceous material, with 30% of secondary inorganic aerosol. There's more ammonia sulfate than ammonia nitrate in Mexico City, and with about 15% of geological material. You can see the brown brown fractions of the pie chart. That's the PM10. But technically, we should subtract the PM2.5 from PM10. And we call the PM coarse fraction PM10 minus 2.5. Then you will see probably about over 80%, 90% of the coarse particles are geological material, with about 15% of the carbonaceous aerosol. Next. As part of the IMADA study, we also conduct some source testing. Here's an example of roadside sampling of vehicle exhaust using ground-based source-dominated method. And sampling, we put in the sampling system. You can see the car is different back then in the 1997. Sampling system was placed on a median, sidewalk, or shoulder within 2 meters from the vehicle exhaust. We also collect the samples from the tunnel. The tunnel has about 85% of the gasoline vehicle, with the remaining being diesel. For diesel exhaust, we sample the intercity bus terminal, trailer parks, and some bus stops, so to get a diesel exhaust source profile. Next. The hot exhaust sampling was also conducted. We captured the cooking emissions. This meat cooking test used two parallel tubes, as you can see from the graphs here. And can you see me in the middle of the figures there? And I was wearing a lab coat to facilitate the testing. We tested the emissions from food processing activities, including deep oil frying, like the one you see here, charcoal boil meat, and the rotisserie chicken. Next. It is important to know that IMADA study established the first time the real-world emission profiles for later source apportionment study that focus on control measures. That here are the examples of source profiles that we rely on to use the abundances of different chemical species in the profile to identify and quantify sources. Elizabeth and her team at the IMP at the time conducted source apportionment study applying cluster analysis, principal component analysis, chemical mass balance, and receptor modeling. So the group find out 45% of the TPM 2.5 mass can be attributed to mobile sources. 16% of each was secondary inorganic aerosol in the geological material. Only about 5% for oil combustion and incineration. Although it's classic at the time, but we were unable with the species we measure. Look at the similarity of the bottom two graph, the gasoline versus diesel bus, and they are quite similar. So they create a collinearity between this profile. So our modeling effort was unable to separate diesel from the gasoline. So we report only as mobile sources. We also did not sample the stack emission with the industrial process for diesel and heavy oil combustion. Next. The recent advances on sampling and analysis allow the application of protocol microsensors for emission characterization studies. So that this graph shows you that we conducted a tunnel study in Hong Kong in 2003 and then again in 2015. We try to evaluate changes in vehicle emissions and also to evaluate effectiveness of pollution control measures that have been implemented in Hong Kong for those years. That we collected CO2, as you can see from the graph here, and that are used to establish emission factors, and along with SO2, NOx, carbonyl, with the cartridge and canister sampling for the light C2 to C12 hydrocarbons. We also collect the particle size distribution along with the filter pack for chemical speciation. So you can see over the years, we have advanced the measurement technologies. Next. Vehicle emission controls in Hong Kong for that period of 2003 to 2015, resulting in 70% reduction in PM 2.5 and in SO2, 44% reduction in non-methane hydrocarbon, but 20 to 30% increase in LPG, liquefied petroleum gas markers, and NO2. This is due to the increased use of LPG fuels and the increased expansion of the diesel oxidation catalyst that result in high LPGs and markers and a high NO2 concentration. And we also find an increase 17 to 38% of the gas and particle phase of the PAHs. So in the over the 10 years, which is important to try to get an understanding of it. And as you can see from the pie chart, we see large variation in PM 2.5 composition from the 2003 to 2015. The largest reduction is found for PM mass. That's about 80% of the reduction. And whereas you can see the most abundant species, which account for 60 to 80% of the PM 2.5, are the black part, which is elemental carbon, and the light blue color, which is organic mass. And this composition, carbonaceous areas are reduced 60 it consists of 80% of the PM 2.5 mass. The largest reduction was found out for elemental carbon. They reduced from over 110 microgram cubic meters on the left to about 25 microgram cubic meter. You might be wondering, the yellow part is sulfate. Sulfate is actually decreased by the pie on the right, showing large fractions. This is because sulfate did not decrease as fast as mass. Mass concentration reduced by about 70%, whereas sulfate reduced about 50%. So it's still a pretty good reduction in sulfate. Next. Yeah. So with the increasing in the fleet of electrical vehicle and stringent vehicle emission controls over the years, engine exhaust emissions have been reduced. But non-tailpipe contribution to ambient PM become more of a concern. This is a study we did in winter of 2020 at two major highway interstate, I-5, I-70 in Southern California. I-5 is near Anaheim, near the Disneyland, someone you may know. I-70 is at Long Beach, along the port of Los Angeles, port of LA. It's kind of Los Angeles. It's kind of important to understand the geological locations. And see from the pie chart, you can see that the highest contribution is from the elemental carbon of the mass ranging from 10 to 50 microgram cubic meter for PM 2.5. The road dust, the brown part, is the major contributor. They contribute 20 to 30% of the PM 2.5 and the 30 to 50% of the PM 10. And let's take a look of the left-hand charts. You can see the blue and red. That's tire, wheel, and brake. So tire, wheel, brake for I-5, and the contribution ranging from about 30%. They are higher than those of black and gray, which is vehicle exhaust, which means that they have 10% higher contribution in PM 2.5 from tire and brakes than the vehicle exhaust. I-70 on the right is not as significant, but for PM10, brake and wheel contributions are 2 to 3 times higher than those of vehicle contributions. So the down-tailpipe contribution to PM need to be further investigated, become a big issue, especially those electric vehicles are so heavy. So we believe there's a lot more tire wheel and brake wheel. Next. Microsensors have been used for air quality management and to detect temporal and spatial variations of pollutant concentrations. On the left side of the figure, we see the mobile vehicle monitoring in a wood-burning stove neighborhood. We can see the brown carbon cloud in an area. So you can see that. So when we drive a sensor within the mobile van, we can understand the spatial variation of the pollutant concentration. On the right is the new technology. They use drone. There's a lot of drone using based monitoring. This is for biomonitoring for PCR called the polymerase reaction chain reaction test, PCR, so that they use this, they can analyze the DNA. So that's for biomonitoring. Next. Here's an example of the garbage burning emission characterization study. Burning of domestic waste is still a common practice in many different countries. That in this case, we we conduct a laboratory simulation combustion experiment for the different municipal solid waste or household solid waste, as you can see from the chart here. This is part of the the garbage was collected from in the map. You can see it's from back. Yeah, sorry. This garbage was collected from the Sasolburg, South Africa, because they have a waste collection intervention program. They help those township people with the kind of poor, low income level, poor township people to trying to collect their waste and the disposal to the landfill to reduce the illegal open burning, which is everywhere, illegal open burning, and to improve the air quality. As you can see, the mass fraction of the municipal solid waste, about 35% is vegetation, so people threw a lot of food waste, dry and wet, and along with about 20% each of the plastics and papers. Next. Those gas and particle emissions can be estimated from laboratory simulated burn conditions. For each test, from the right-hand side of the figure, you can see we put the 0.5 to 20 grams of the material, then put this crucible, ceramic crucible, inside of the wood stove. And we maintain the temperature very high at 450 degrees C to simulate large-scale field burn. And we managed to burn different material. Took about 15 to 60 minutes, but usually it's about 30 minutes so we can get an adequate burn. And as you see in the slide, that we have a suite of continuous gas and particle monitors. I want to emphasize on the right-hand corner the ELPI plus. That's the electrical low pressure impactor, which can give you the good size distribution data, and also the soot spectrometer to get to species brown carbon from black carbon. And that's fine. Thank you. Next. Yeah. Organic elemental carbon accounts for about 50 to 90% PM2.5 mass. Here's the example of the organic and the in blue and the black carbon in black. You see high organic bar, we're using CO2 to CO plus CO2 ratio to calculate the modified combustion efficiency. We call it MCE. We see high to determine the phase of the burning. We see high organic carbon is smoldering, dominate the burning, especially for rubber, plastic, and some wet vegetations. And then we see high EC in flaming phase for the plastic burning. The smoldering is what you see when you see a smoke plume, that you see a whitish and brownish color, that's smoldering. And flaming, usually at the beginning of the forest fire, you see a lot of flare, that's what flaming phase. So that you can see from the color, different deposits of color on filter indicate the presence of brown carbon and black carbon. Black carbon absorbs light, but recent study have been shown that brown carbon absorbs light for the lower wavelength, less than 400 nanometer in the ultraviolet ranges. They present mostly in the smoldering phase of the biomass burning. Next. Higher abundance of N-alkanes, that's from the garbage burning in yellow, phthalates in pink, and the pHs I find for the rubber and plastics. I want to make sure you take a look at the bottom of the graph. Those high 5 to 6 ring heavy pHs, and that we typically find in plastics and rubbers burn. And the lower 4-ring pHs find in the paper and textile. So they have pretty much unique markers for us to do future source apportionment. This pHs pose a very high health risk. Next. Based on the benzene O-A pyrene, the BAP toxicity equivalent, we estimate the cancer rates for PAHs and nitro PAHs. We find that they are much higher for rubber and plastic burning. So that I want to point out that plastic burning has become a new concern in environmental management, especially lots of plastic being burned in the wildfires. Next. To assess research, health and environmental impacts of air pollution requires lots of field sampling, laboratory analysis, and modeling. So EAF, Environmental Analysis Facility, was established in 1985, developed tried to develop new measurement technologies and interpret results. We have been doing for thousands of samples so far. And you can see from the graph, we determine mass concentration by microbalance on the right, and we determine the elemental concentration by X-ray fluorescence and inductive coupled plasma mass spectrometry. Next. There's large, consistent, long-term database sets are needed to understand environmental variability. In addition to the mass concentration and the elemental concentration, we measure anions and a suite of anions, including sulfate nitrate, and cations, including ammonia, organic acid, and carbonate, including levoglucosan, and by ion chromatography. Those are the markers for different source apportionments. And then we also measure carbon, organic, elemental carbon, and brown carbon, and carbonate carbon by multi-wavelength thermo-optical carbon analysis method. We can also use a small punch without the solvent extraction to do the organic speciation by thermal desorption, gas chromatography, mass spectrometer for alkanes, PAHs, and hopines and sterins. Next. So the new technologies are emerging to better address the environmental problems. Here, we recently acquired a photoionization time-of-flight mass spectrometer. They use high-intensity lasers and self-ionization to determine complex environmental contaminants. We can measure those contaminants such as PFAS, you probably heard about. Those are the per and polyfluoroalkyl substance, and that actually in US at least we start to manufacture man-made chemical compounds and using the industrial products, and because they have very high property of the heat, the resistance in heat, oil, and water, so they've been used for the 50 so many years, and then but the problem is PFAS, they persist in the environment, humans and the animals. So you can see that in US we're trying to set up a PFAS standard or not the regulations to minimize the PFAS. Another emerging contaminant is micro and nanoplastic, and microplastic pollution become a global concern because we don't used to know about it. So now we try to understand how to to do the plastic. I put the nanoplastic here because interesting enough, the water people say microplastic is defined as less than 5 micron. That's really huge for us. So we do PM 2.5, that's 2.5 micron. So now the atmospheric scientists start to call the nanoplastic in water, food, and the environment. The bottom of this graph, you can see how rubber decompose at different thermal fractions and different chemical compounds come out at different temperatures. And so those are the ones we use to understand the different markers for the modeling. Next. Chemical composition varied between fresh and aged biomass burning. This figure shows markers for biomass combustion emissions following the soft and selective ionization. It can be related to health effect by source apportionment. It's a complicated graphs. I've tried to identify many of the compounds which you might be familiar with. We use resonance-enhanced multi-photon ionization and single photon ionization with electron capture to detect different biomass markers. It's a very powerful instrument. However, it gives you every second measurement, so it's overwhelmed in terms of data processing. Next. Mining has been a significant driver for U.S. and Mexico economy. The mine dust exposure has been related to the adverse effect, as you can see on the right-hand corner, right side of the slides. Those are the black lung disease that means the exposure to the mine dust cause a lot of pneumoconiosis and silicosis. So we have been doing the recent research to try to quantify this so-called RCS, respirable crystalline silica, and by Fourier transform, infrared spectrometer, Raman spectrometry, and the X-ray diffraction. That in US, the occupational OSHA, or Occupational Safety and Health Administration, set up this permissible exposure limits for the miners. We call the PEL. The PEL for silica for RCS value in US, just last year they changed from 100 to 50 microgram cubic meters. So for the 8-hour time weighted average. So for the 8-hour working shift, they have to be less than 50. Check the internet, find out that in Mexico, you do have a PEL, the permissible exposure limit is 25 microgram cubic meter, much 50% lower than those of US. And it's encouraged to see that they use that to protect the miners. Thank you. Next. The above slides shows the example of air quality studies. Somebody is trying to call in. Sorry. Air quality studies require interdisciplinary expertise, and where the atmospheric chemists and scientists, and we work with environmental engineers. Environmental engineers strive to protect and improve the environment, including air, water, waste management, and the waste remediation. And so the air quality, we need to work with toxicologists, biostatisticians, epidemiologists, and physicians in order to relate pollution to the health effects. With the recent advances, and we advocate the transition from the fossil fuel-based energy system to more sustainable and renewable energy system. Then we need to work with energy experts, economists to strive for energy efficiency. We also need to work with the environmental policymaker to work with them to help them to develop and implement different control strategy and regulations. And they usually try to strive for a balance between the environmental protection and the cost, and so for cost and their economic impacts. So environmental scientists is a very multidisciplinary field. Next. Health effect experts relate adverse effects to human exposure and evaluate risk. That this is a study we did many years ago with medical experts from the Columbia University. We tried to assess the effects of the coal-fired power plant emissions on newborn babies in central China. So we followed the exposure from the pregnant woman to their child's birth. Back. And we monitor the PM 2.5 PAHs and the heavy metals, and then we look at those biomarkers such as PAH, DNA adducts, heavy metals. So we follow up with the child development. Usually they have a slow development when they're exposed to the heavy pollution, and then they might have a higher risk for asthma and cancer risk. Next. Those skills we gain from one environmental issues can be applied to other provinces. This top figure shows the large-scale air quality study in Central California that separate the regional from the local effects. It also help us to understand the complication of complicated atmospheric process and their adverse environmental and health impacts. And we all know that air pollution damage the ancient artifact and the cultural heritage. The bottom graph shows that we work with the Chinese Academy of Science scientists to perfect the method to evaluate atmospheric degradation of the terracotta warrior. You might know about the terracotta warrior. That was constructed 2,200 years ago to protect the tomb of this Emperor Qin. He wanted protection, so he built a whole army to protect his afterlife. Next. I'm not a feminist. However, women does face unique challenges for science achievement. We need to balance between career and family, which I often find difficult. And women are often less supportive of each other. They compete with each other than a man. Men doesn't always compete with women or with other men. And in general, more is expected for women when it comes than men when we come to the promotion. Next. So I collected some of the funnies to entertain you. That here are in black what your supervisor says, in red what they really mean. If your supervisor says it's not about the money, definitely it's all about the money. Everything is about money, about the finance situation. If the supervisor says the reports need some minor revision, that means I haven't read it yet. And they want you to talk to the department secretary, means get lost. I really don't have time for you. If the supervisor thinks your idea doesn't seem to be feasible, that means not going to happen. No way it's going to happen. And if they read your article, say something about that is interesting, that means who cares? If your supervisor tells you you could benefit from more training, that means you don't know what you're doing, so you better get your act together to keep your job. So if the supervisor says, I don't understand what you talk about, that means get away, shove it. So next time when your supervisor says something, remember what do they really mean. Next. Here are some opportunities for atmospheric science graduates as environmental scientists. Many of the young students like to stay in college, university, or research institute to teach or conduct research. Environmental engineer consulting firm and another choice, the more private environmental engineer firm. I worked for 6 years before I went at the environmental firm, before I went back to graduate school. I got the opportunity to participate in many different projects, and I learned a lot. So it's a pretty good practice for you. And they're highly competitive. They don't have enough projects to get rid of you, but they are a good chance for you to practice, to learn different skills. And you can join the local, state, and national pollution control agency, a stable job, and help them set up a regulation to help the environment. Industry and their environmental consortia also needs expertise in environmental engineer. They usually pays better. And so now more and more we find more and more environmental advocacy group. Those are called the NGOs. they work independently to address different environmental issues. So they usually are non-profit and they really mean to help the environment. Next. Those are the emerging air quality research application area. We need to measure multiple pollutants in order to assess multiple effects from the air quality air quality management. And we need to consider intermediate transfer among air, water, and land for all these emerging contaminants I mentioned earlier, such as PFAS, microplastic, and nanoplastic. As I mentioned, the microplastic become a global issues these days because they really affect the economy and also ecological and health systems. With more intense fire, you see in the news and for U.S. and North America all the time these days in Canada and U.S., they have more intense, because due to the climate change, they are more intense and more frequency, intense fires. So fire ecology is being a term that being used to examine the effects of wildfires and ecosystem because as climate changes, they affect the temperature, precipitation, and vegetation. So the ecosystem changes when you have such more frequent fires. Gas and particle microsensors, many of you probably use it, and the UAVs, unmanned area vehicles, and the satellite observation has been more and more used to give us a broader aspects of spatial variation, both vertically and horizontally. With always 1 second measurement, we really need to integrate the data. So data mining and data fusion become a new term along with artificial intelligence and machine learning. What we do is we try to integrate those data to look for the patterns to see if we can be more cost effectively to run the projects. EPA and many different associations have been pushing these days for so-called green living. That means you need to be more energy efficiency, trying to increase the recycling and waste management and the sustainability. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to adopting a more eco-friendly practice for your left and in terms of adapt changings of climate. Ever since the COVID, the global health has been raised more issues in terms of more raised recognitions. People are trying to understand the global health, transponder pollution, and emission controls. And let's not forget environmental education from the K-12 and public engagement. So it's public outreach is very important. Let people know what are we trying to do and what are we trying to accomplish. Next. For the next few slides, I'd like to share my experience in terms of the lessons learned from the past 40-some years. First, you like to really establish relationships and stay connected. Aggressively participate in internationally complex environmental and atmospheric science association like AWMS, many of you know, AAAR, AR, AGU, AMS meetings, so that you can meet a lot of people and learn a lot from others. And you want to become active in this professional association. You want to bring forward new ideas and offer services. Typically, we organize technical sessions at national and international conferences if you want to let them know what you have been doing in Mexico. So you can volunteer to organize the technical session. Typically, just have to write a proposal, a very short abstract, and then to submit to the organization committee and to point out what are the subject and who are the speakers you're going to invite, etc. And you also like to volunteer for public presentation, establish a network. A lot of times the public presentation will give you a lot of more publicity. And for senior like me, now I've been more of the advisory and mentoring committee and roles to help the young professional to develop their career. And my colleague, like I showed you earlier, my colleague and I like to conduct workshop and training courses and meet a lot of young professionals, encourage them to keep up with to protect the environment. And let's not ignore the honors and the awards. Ask your colleague to nominate you for awards. They're not going to think about it. You need to get a package together for them to submit it. That's how you get an award. Next. Many of the things I show you, most research require us to get financial support. It really doesn't matter where are you and what do you do. Even in the state, local agency, you need to form the so-called RFP, responsible proposal, to get a project going. So get the budget together to apply for the budget. So I feel that you really need to practice preparing winning proposals. So typically, we like to pursue joint proposal collaboration with other expertise in the same or other discipline area. This effort also limited some competitors. Some of the competitors ask them to join you, so that you don't get a whole pie, but you still get a piece of the pie. And you actively review external proposal, report, and manuscript, and learn from others. And it's very important to develop a budget templates and the boilerplate. So you need to keep a good record of the past project performance, deliverables, and publications. So and that many projects, I did this one proposal yesterday. They want to see what have I done over the past 5 years. So you need to have all these things in hand, such as the list of all the equipment you own, all the instrument you have accessibility to demonstrate you have a good infrastructure and a good resume for the teams. And so when there's an opportunity come to seek for funding, so those things should be really already been ready to go. And it's very important to be responsive and specific with scope of work, but innovative on technical approach. There are cases we disagree with the scope of work, but you can't just tell them you don't know what you're doing. But you can suggest you might want to consider this and others so that people can understand your innovative approach. We usually, for the large-scale proposal, we have a checklist, because when they ask for a proposal, they have several requirements for insurance, for liability, for just anything you can think about. So you need to have a list for the proposal criteria and focus on their evaluation criteria. Are they they care for more if you have the instrument? Are they more, or do they care for more of your expertise or your past experience? And the fact is that you want to price to win. It is. And the sponsor always want more than they can afford it. So it is, you want to be flexible. You want to go beyond the scope of work. We don't cost the proposal because the costs always get too high. So we say we price to win. And if you fail for the proposal, ask for the evaluation. Some of them, they don't tell you, they just say, sorry, you're not selected. But most of them have external reviewers. You don't have to agree with the reviewer, but you can learn from them, or you can learn not to make the same mistakes next time. Next. We want to hone in the communication skills. So Dr. Watson and when we develop the reference database, we have hundreds of thousands of the articles. So any articles you want, we can almost immediately through EndNote and to dig down. You want to read a lot. When I was a graduate student, I started to read one article per day. I also make notes and put a date and give them a star. So it's a good article, I give it 3-4 stars. It's a pretty bad article, you give it 1 star, just for my own personal that entertainment. But Reading is very important. I review articles, and very often I find people cite the wrong articles. Or I look at the articles they cited and find out that was not the right articles. And the practice scientific writing, Jiang Watson and I, in the workshop, we teach scientific writing. And I think it's very important to learn the writing and master the response to reviewers' comments. I've been the editor-in-chief for different journals over the past many years. I find people have common mistakes. Most people try to please the reviewers. So every single response, they say, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You don't need to thank you very much. The truth is, reviewer is not going to see your comments. Most of the time, the editor see your comments when you revise the manuscript. So it's very important to not only answer the response to the reviewer's comments, but incorporate those comments, copy the paragraph, show that where have you make changes in the revised manuscript. That way you can prevent them to send out to re-review, and the reviewer is never going to see it, so the editor can make a decision. And it's important to have people you respect to review your writing, maybe invite them as co-author. They can polish your English, they can help you with some technical aspect which you did not know about it. Focus, when you do a presentation, you really want to focus on a few points. I know I'm all over the place today because I'm trying to summarize all different studies and I use one slide to explain the $500,000 studies. So it's but typically you want to focus a few key points. Don't be repeated yourself in your presentation and in your publication. When selecting a journal for publication, we want to seek citation. And if this can give you a publicity to have more project opportunity above the impact factor. I don't know about in Mexico, but in China, they get paid by the multiply 1,000 RMB times the impact factor. So everybody's go for the high impact factor journal, which I tend to disagree. I feel a good article, and if you make it very clear, we'll get really good citations. Next. I have a few thoughts for the early career scientists. First, recognize your strengths and weakness, and your creativity, your writing skill, your presentation skill, your outreach method, and the different organization, leadership, budgeting. So recognize what can you do the best, and you need to focus on what you like and what you care. And keep your options open, the academia, government, or private industry. It is often, honestly, the job chooses you, not you choose the job. So you don't really always have a lot of choice, but you can always change a job later if you don't like it. Once you like it, you will do well. Learn how to set up priorities and work more efficiently and practice multitasking. So that I used to be able to do multitasking a lot better than these days, but multitasking is very important, and then you need to use your time efficiently. And be confident, show dedication, pursue perfection, and keep up with the good work and never give up. Next. We also joke about that. Can we be optimistic that the challenges can be met? We always just joke about developing a career path as an air quality or environmental scientist. It's like a home improvement. There's two basic principles for the home improvement. There's no such a thing as a small job. Everything takes longer and costs more than you thought. Think about it, see if I'm right in terms of this is a home improvement when they try to fix anything. But next, we can do it. Here are examples of two photos. The left panel shows Pittsburgh in the morning, 9:20 in the morning, and it's still dark. Pittsburgh is known to be a city of smoke. And the air pollution originated from the coal combustion and steel making. So they were really polluted that over those 1940 to 1950s. After 1960, they start to put a lot of pollution control. They shut down a lot of industry. But the CEC figures on the right, 60 years later, we can see the clear sky. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I would like to entertain any questions if you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. We will go for the question. Rodolfo?
Hello, Jody. This is Rodolfo.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I know you very well and admire you for many years, especially at the Air Waste Management Association.
Thank you.
Okay, and my question is, you had a lot of achievements, but what do you consider as your most important achievement in your professional life? You are an example as a woman in the science.
Oh, I don't know about that. Thank you. So the question is that I think, I don't know if it's important, but that I think the things I consider the most important are that we educate the next generation. We see the student. When we see our student learn how to give a presentation, how to publish a paper, and how to start a career path, that's most important to me and to many of my colleagues. That's most rewarding. Because the bottom line is we rely on the young professional and we will rely on the next generation.
Thank you.
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Muchísimas gracias por la plática, realmente muy
Thank you very
interesante.
much for your presentation. It was a really interesting lecture, and thank you for sharing not only your achievements and results and giving us an overview of the field, but also for sharing your experience throughout your professional career as a scientist, as well as your points of view and advice, which are very useful, definitely for our students and for our young researchers, but also for those that are more senior. It's still interesting to listen to everything. In addition to congratulating you and thanking you for your lecture, I have a doubt. Why is it that oftentimes, for example, if we consider those changes in percentages of concentration of different ingredients or substances, why do you stick to percentages and not absolute values? Yes, we can see a change in the distribution of contaminants or pollutants at one point in time and compared against another, but no change in absolute numbers. Can you tell us about the difference and why?
Very good point. Thank you for your comments. You're absolutely right. So this is the differences. When we do publications, we give the numbers because people can understand when they read the numbers. And so the concentration, yes, we always have a concentration for PM. We always concentration in microgram cubic meter for the ppm, ppb for the gases and pollutants. However, for presentation purpose, we often convert it to the fractions because it's easier for people to understand the piece of pie and how they distribute it. So it's just a different way to communicate. And for public, they don't understand the number. They don't understand 100 microgram cubic meter of PM2.5 is too high. But they will understand when they're high, they have a lot of carbonaceous material. There are a lot of them from some pollution sources. So that they have, it's better to, it's one of the way we do communication. But that's why we do more for tables for publication, and we do more for figures for presentation. Did I answer your question?
Sí, yes. Thank you very much.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Doctora.
She's asking if there are any other questions. Doctor, please.
It was great to hear you with many ideas, with your experience. And do you consider that we will include in a near future the microplastic and nanoparticles in the regulation?
Very difficult questions. Very good questions. This is just 2 days ago, I heard in the news there's a plastic pollution in Geneva, Switzerland. So this is a global concern and global issues. But we just learned that in the last maybe 10 years. So what do we anticipate for that to be a regulation like PFAS? Yes, in the future. But first, we have to learn how to collect. We work with water people for hydrology. And we also collect, we also try to analyze data from the filter. What happened is we really don't have a lot of data, and they're using a so-called FTR, Fourier transform infrared spectrometer. They're really not specific. So now we try to look at we try to analyze. First, you have to identify and quantify like particle. We can identify elements, mass, beyond the mass. We can identify ions and carbon. But for plastic, there's so many different plastics. And I think there was, University of Hawaii was Pacific Hawaii University, one of them. They were making the plastic standard now. So first, we have to standardize the sampling and analysis method. Second, we have to build a database. You cannot set up a regulation if you don't know what is most polluted pollutants and what level will be safe. So this is going to be a very complicated issue. And at the same time, we're trying to give public awareness not to use plastic. Like in California, you can get a grocery bag with plastic grocery bag without paying for it. If you don't want to pay for it, you have to bring your own bag. So we're trying to, and in Taiwan, they stopped to give the straws for any drinks. And so that we're trying to use a different way to try to help people to understand the plastic pollution and affect the fish and affect the people. So that, and another way to do is to mitigate, to remove the plastic. Recently, we submitted a proposal for the NASA space grant, and then we're trying to see those astronauts, hopefully we're not exposed to the plastic by using some photosynthesis, photocatalyst to mitigate some of the plastics. So there's all different ways. I would say this probably is going to take a long, long time because, and the first we need to see if we can get funding to do more plastic approach. Our lab, I show you this instrument, is because we obtained this instrument so we can try to understand how plastic evolve in what compound comes out, in what kind of temperature, so we can further understand how can we use that to identify and quantify sources. You can see the South Africa project, which is very interesting to see plastic really pollutes, especially plastic bags. They're easier to burn than plastic bottle, but they both, and rubbers. Rubbers is another thing people burn. But that really causes a lot of health hazards.
Thank you.
¿Alguien más que te hacer una pregunta? ¿Alguien más? Sí. No? Okay, Judy, I would like to ask one question, please.
Sure.
How can young scientists improve the opportunities for collaboration in other countries and also for funding?
The young scientists should seek for this fellowship of, for those opportunities. Like we now have Xiaoliang Wang to be the atmospheric science program director. He seek for all different websites. He tell people, here's the fellowship. You can be postdoc or you'll be a Fulbright scholarship. So you need to seek for this Fulbright scholarship. It was from the Fulbright left it to. So we host several Fulbright scholarship. So the young scientists should really be trying to engage with senior. Now, hopefully, don't be shy. I got students ask some, I want to say stupid questions, some very, very bad questions from time to time. But so students really should go to reach others to see if that if they can get involved in different projects. Some professor got a big project, volunteer, do it for free. Once you get in, eventually they will try to find funding to cover you. So I feel that volunteer, putting your time is very important for the young scientists to learn and in order to collaborate with others and to learn from the project and seek for the funding. Yes, it is hard. It's hard for junior. It's hard for senior these days, especially in US. They've been cutting all the research funding these days.
There are some questions from the social media, and somebody's asking you. Well, thank you for the chat, and then say it's very interesting talk. Thank you. Do you know if GC can be combined with RMPI or soft ionization? It will be a powerful identification tool. What do you think?
That's a very interesting question. Shall we go back to that slide of the photoionization? Yeah, this one. No, next one. Next. So the question is, can we see this unit use soft ionization intense laser? So the question is, can we use GC, gas chromatography? This is such interesting because when I wrote the proposal for the National Science Foundation, I proposed to combine this soft ionization with gas chromatography. But what happened is they're still in the testing stages. So at this point, they did not work. So that we're using RAMPI, so-called resonance enhanced photoionization and single photoionization. And the electron capture detector can help a lot. What will happen is one give you continuous spectrum, one give you different integration. So this is really quite new technique. And Germans made this unit. They are trying to connect to the GC. I tried to buy the GC, but they didn't want to sell me the GC because they say it doesn't work perfectly yet. So hopefully, this type of technology is so complicated. I have to hire a postdoc fellow from Germany to help us to set up for 1 year so that so you can see, but hopefully we can do, actually we can also do bioaerosol, I forgot to mention, do PFAS plastics, but hopefully we will develop some markers and that we can use for source apportionment.
Thank you. There is another one from the social media. They ask, what has been your experience with presenting your diagnosis to decision maker? Do they take them into account or they don't care?
Interesting. Yes, they do take into account if you speak with scientific evidence. They do consider. So, like Elizabeth, you mentioned that I served 6 years as a charter member of the CASEC, Clinical Scientific Advisory Committee. In the U.S., we choose 7 people, including the chair. including one atmospheric scientist, that's me, one epidemiologist, one that the state local agency, one statistician, one toxicology. So every single member is a different field. So when we presented, we review all the data and we presented the result, and we are trying to justify why those things should be in the policy. So these will be scientific basis research to support your argument to set up a regulation.
Thank you. There is the last one from the social media, and they ask you, how do you choose your career, and who inspire you?
This is a terrible question. I'm joking. Okay. When I was in college, I did not I want to be a horticulture. I like the flowers, the garden, but I did not make it. My point was not enough. So I ended up majoring in biology. Okay. And so I did not choose it. I didn't like the biology. So, but the only way you can apply for graduate school in US have to be related to your BS degree. So my BS degree was in biology. So I didn't know until later you can be a physician, but that was not what I knew. And so when I came to US, I find a job because I didn't want to be a animal physiology major for a master's degree. I never finished that. And I wanted to, so I find a job in the environmental consulting firm. And I started work with a whole bunch of scientists and modeler, and they inspired me a lot in terms of what can you do? What don't you know this? What you should do that? So that's really a great experience. That's why I feel consulting firm is a good place to start it, especially when I first started. All I did was drawing a few map and send people to do the copy machine and copy it. So we don't have a word processing at the time, but you learn a lot. And what happened, the truth is, why did I choose my career is because 1982, we call the Reagan's, if you remember Ronald Reagan, Reagan's administration, they are like Trump, they anti-environment, the anti-environmental policy. They have very poor job market. At the time, most of my group got laid off. So I was worried I didn't have a job. But the only thing I know is environmental science. And the only place I applied was Harvard. Actually, I applied Harvard and Yale University because it's close by. I live in Boston. So that's how I, probably not a very good example, but that's how I got into graduate school. And when I finished my master's degree, my professor asked me to pursue a doctorate degree. I was not going to pursue doctorate degree because my mother felt if woman should not be, is still always thinking, should not be independent, should not get a doctorate degree, and nobody's going to marry you if you have a PhD. So, but my professor encouraged me to pursue a doctorate degree. I really appreciate that ever since, because I still remember he told me, you're too old, because I was, 30 some years old, and you're too old to change your mind again. So the economy, when the economy is bad, maybe it's good for some student, do some work, go back to pursue your career. So I guess that's how I got involved with my career. It's just by a lot of different chances. That's what happened to many people, right?
Thank you so much for everything. And we will send you your, I don't know, how do you say, the recognition paper or whatever for your talk today.
Oh, you're going to give me a plaque? A certificate? Thank you.
Le damos un aplauso, por favor. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope one of this day I could come in person and really, really interact with all of you.
Thank you so much, Judith. So we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Okay, bye.